The unintentional threat. The translucent doors of transport vessel KX-427 slid open with a gentle hiss. Ilara Chen took a deep breath, adjusted her Earth Confederation uniform, and stepped onto the gleaming arrival deck of the Galactic Concordat Academy. The moment her boots touched the polished surface, a visible ripple of alarm spread through the welcoming committee. 27 faculty members representing species from across the Concordat flinched almost in unison. Tentacles retracted, photosensitive membranes shuddered, exoskeletons clicked into defensive postures, and gelatinous forms undulated in obvious distress. Through their various environmental suits and breathing apparatus, sensory organs focused on her with what she could only interpret as collective alarm. They act like I'm about to attack them, Ilara thought, reflexively scanning the area for actual threats. Administrator Vexlor approached. Though approached was generous, the 8-limbed arthropoid maintained a careful distance of precisely 5.2 meters. Later, Ilara would learn this was the minimum safe distance according to Concordat xenobiological safety protocols. Welcome, human Chen, to the Academy. Vexlor's translator struggled with the formal greeting, the device at the administrator's mandible pulsing with blue light. We have prepared specialized accommodations for your unique physiological requirements. The way Vexlor emphasized unique made it sound more like terrifying. Ilara smiled, hoping the expression translated across species barriers as friendly rather than threatening. Thank you for the welcome. I'm honored to represent Earth as your first human student. A nearby being with translucent skin and visible internal organs whispered to its companion, a floating cloud of bioluminescent particles. The translator caught fragments, predator stance, and displays teeth aggressively. Ilara quickly closed her smile. Cultural misunderstandings were expected, but this level of apparent fear confused her. Standing 172 centimeters with an athletic but hardly imposing build, she had never considered herself intimidating. As the formal welcome concluded, Ilara was escorted to her quarters by 3 hovering security drones, rather than the customary faculty guide. The corridors of the Academy Station were marvels of interspecies architecture, wide enough for the largest beings with seamlessly shifting atmosphere bubbles, gravity adjusters, and temperature zones. Her quarters were located at the end of a sealed corridor with warning signs in 42 known languages. These are your quarters, announced the station AI through a speaker. Reinforced walls, independent life support, and emergency containment fields for your comfort and safety. And for everyone else's safety from me, Ilara realized. The room was spacious with Earth-standard gravity and atmosphere. One wall was transparent, offering a stunning view of the massive gas giant the station orbited, with rings of academic satellites surrounding it. Another wall displayed her class schedule, blinking with numerous warnings about restricted areas and safety protocols. Ilara sat on the bed, feeling the weight of isolation. Hours ago, she had been celebrated on Earth as a pioneer. Now she felt like a monster. Her neural interface pinged with a message. Her first academic assignment, a 500-page document titled Deathworlder Integration, Understanding Your Classification. Curious, she began reading. Class 12 Deathworlds, such as Terra/Earth, are extreme planetary environments featuring most or all of the following: extreme gravity gradients, aggressive atmospheric composition, severe temperature variations, high radiation levels, abundant predator evolution, microbial saturation, and tectonic instability. Sapient species evolving on such worlds develop biological adaptations that render them potential biohazards in standard galactic environments. Ilara's eyes widened as she continued reading. According to galactic classification, humans were walking biological weapons. Their bones were described as internal calcium-based offensive structures. Their immune systems were classified as hyper-aggressive microbial warfare. Their muscle density was labeled assault grade. Even their digestive system was described as capable of processing compounds lethal to 89% of Concordat species. The document explained that the average human could survive conditions that would kill most galactic citizens instantly, from temperature extremes to radiation levels to atmospheric toxins. It described Earth's gravity as crushing and its atmospheric pressure as extreme. A section on human psychology was equally concerning, describing their evolutionary history as apex predators, with pack-hunting instincts, territorial aggression patterns, and persistent pursuit-predation techniques. Ilara laughed in disbelief, then stopped when she realized the room was likely monitored. What the document described as exceptional survival traits was just being human. Nothing about herself had ever seemed remarkable on Earth. That evening, Ilara received a message from Professor Tlzer, her xenobiology instructor. Human Chen, I am your faculty advisor. Please report to Laboratory 7 tomorrow for baseline physiological assessments. Note, please refrain from rapid movements, displaying teeth, direct eye contact with empathic species, or consuming food in public areas. Your cooperation with these temporary measures will facilitate integration. This wasn't going to be easy. She had come to study advanced stellar engineering, not to be studied herself. Looking out at the stars through her window, Ilara remembered the words of the Earth Confederation ambassador during her orientation. You're not just a student, you're a diplomat. How you represent humanity will determine whether doors open or close for those who follow. Ilara typed a quick reply to Professor Tlzer. I'll be there. Thank you for your guidance. Then she made a decision. She would approach this challenge like any other engineering problem, with careful observation, data collection, and hypothesis testing. If humans were seen as dangerous Deathworlders, she would need to understand exactly why, and then carefully demonstrate that humans were more than just their evolutionary adaptations. As she prepared for bed, the station's night cycle dimming the lights automatically, Ilara noticed something odd. The environmental controls in her room were set to what the system labeled extreme Earth conditions, yet the temperature, humidity, gravity, and air composition felt perfectly normal to her. What felt normal to her was apparently considered extreme by galactic standards. The realization was both amusing and troubling. Ilara Chen, ordinary engineering student from New Seattle, was considered one of the most dangerous beings on the entire station. Tomorrow would be interesting, she thought as she drifted off to sleep beneath a warning label that read, Caution. DEATHWORLDER con TNNT area. Ilara's first day of classes started with disaster. She arrived early to advanced xenobiology, carefully choosing a seat in the back corner where she hoped to attract minimal attention. Students filed in, their various appendages and sensory organs twitching nervously when they spotted her. A clear bubble of empty seats formed around her. Professor Tlzer, a being with bioluminescent skin that shifted colors with emotional states, began the lecture. His skin had settled into a cautious yellow-green as he discussed cellular adaptation to different planetary environments. Today, we will examine how various species modify their internal chemistry too. He stopped mid-sentence as Ilara raised her hand. His skin flashed a startled orange. Yes, Human Chen, he asked, voice amplified through his translator. I had a question about the reading on cellular regeneration, Ilara said politely. 3 students nearest to her immediately activated their personal shields. Professor Tlzer's color deepened to a worried amber. Perhaps save questions for after class, he suggested. Now, as I was saying. Ilara nodded and lowered her hand. She hadn't realized that direct questions might be interpreted as confrontational. She made a mental note to approach professors privately. Later that day, in advanced materials science, disaster struck again. Students were testing the durability of a new composite material developed for deep space applications. This polymer crystal matrix can withstand forces up to 950 megapascals, explained Professor Jixna, a spherical being who floated rather than walked. It is essentially unbreakable by any biological entity. The students passed around sample pieces. When Ilara's turn came, she gently took the material between her fingers to examine its light-refracting properties. The sample snapped in half with a sharp crack. The classroom went silent. Dozens of alien sensory organs turned toward her in shock. "I barely touched it," Ilara said, horrified. "I'm so sorry." Professor Jixna's translator emitted a high-pitched tone that might have been alarm. "Class dismissed," she announced before quickly floating away. By day 3, word had spread. Ilara had broken 3 more unbreakable materials in various classes, caused a sensitive plant species to enter emergency dormancy by merely approaching it in botany class, and accidentally knocked over a crystalline student when turning too quickly in a hallway. The nutrition center experience was possibly the most humiliating. Ilara entered during peak meal hours, tray in hand. As she walked toward an empty table, a wave of reactions rippled through the room. Several gaseous beings condensed slightly. Others stopped mid-consumption. Ilara sat down and opened her earth food container of rice, vegetables, and a small portion of synthesized protein. The scent wafted through the air. 3 students immediately left their tables. Several others activated small personal ventilators. She heard whispers through nearby translator devices. "Consuming actual cellular matter. And look at those tearing implements. And is that once living tissue?" Ilara realized her meal, perfectly normal to her, was horrifying to species who synthesized nutrients directly or consumed only mineral compounds. She quickly closed her container and left, cheeks burning with embarrassment. On day 5 came the physical assessment in comparative physiology. Students were testing their species' natural abilities in the Academy's adaptable gymnasium. When Ilara's turn came, Professor Tlzer instructed her to perform light cardiovascular activity. She began a gentle jog around the track. Alarms immediately blared. Red lights flashed. 3 security drones descended from the ceiling. "HLT, biological threat level 4, announced the station eye. "Predatory movement pattern is DTCT." Professor Tlzer frantically waved his limbs. "System override. This is an authorized demonstration." The alarm ceased, but students cowered at the edges of the room. Ilara stopped, mortified. "Perhaps just walk," suggested Professor Tlzer, his skin now a deep purple. Next came strength assessment. Ilara was asked to demonstrate a basic exercise from her planet. She dropped to the floor and performed a standard push-up. 2 empathic students immediately collapsed. A medical drone rushed to their aid. "Experiencing your muscle contractions causes them pain," explained Professor Tlzer. "Your body is exerting forces that would tear their musculature apart." By the end of the week, Ilara had become a reluctant celebrity. Students observed her from safe distances. Professors modified entire lesson plans around her presence. The administration sent daily safety updates. The final challenge came in advanced energy systems with Professor Drolixin, a tall crystalline being whose structure refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. Today we discuss Theoretical Energy Conversion System MX720, announced Professor Drolixin. This system could revolutionize interstellar travel, but it can only be calibrated under extreme pressure and temperature conditions. Holographic diagrams displayed the system specifications and calibration requirements. Pressure equivalent to 4 kilometers below Earth's ocean surface, temperatures approaching freezing, and precise manipulation of unstable elements. "Of course, this remains theoretical," continued Professor Drolixin. "No biological entity could manipulate the calibration equipment under such conditions. The pressure would crush most species, the cold would freeze cellular activity, and the precision required exceeds biological capability." Ilara studied the specifications. The conditions described were certainly challenging, but not impossible. Deep-sea researchers on Earth worked in similar environments. The cold was nothing compared to a Montana winter, and the manipulation just required steady hands. "I could try," Ilara said quietly. The class went silent. Professor Drolixin's crystalline structure vibrated in what might have been surprise. "Human Chen, perhaps you misunderstand. These conditions are lethal to biological systems. Not to humans." Ilara replied. "We have deep-sea workers who function in similar pressures. The temperature is within our tolerance range, and I've done microassembly work before." Professor Drolekson consulted his data tablet, presumably reviewing human physiological data. His posture shifted in what Ilara had come to recognize as academic interest overcoming fear. "Fascinating," he said finally. "Would you be willing to attempt this as a demonstration? It would be unprecedented." The unexpected asset. An hour later, Ilara stood before the calibration chamber in the advanced laboratory. A crowd had gathered, not just students from her class, but professors, administrators, and even Administrator Vexlor himself. The chamber was a reinforced transparent cylinder filled with specialized equipment. Warning signs in multiple languages covered its surface. "The chamber will gradually increase pressure and decrease temperature," explained Professor Drolekson. "You may exit at any point if you experience distress." Ilara nodded, donning the specialized gloves that would allow her to manipulate the molecular assembly tools. "Beginning demonstration," announced the eye. Ilara entered the chamber. The door sealed with a hiss. The temperature began to drop as pressure increased. She felt the familiar sensation of pressure in her ears, similar to deep diving. The cold made her fingers slightly less nimble, but still functional. Through the transparent barrier, she could see the astonished faces of students and faculty, their various appendages pressed against the surface in fascination. When the optimal conditions were reached, Ilara began the delicate work of system calibration. The tools were designed for mechanical manipulation, not biological hands, but she adapted quickly. Her fingers moved steadily, connecting molecular bonds, stabilizing volatile elements, and carefully aligning the theoretical system's components. 30 minutes later, the supposedly impossible calibration was complete. The energy conversion system glowed with a soft blue light, perfectly balanced and functional. Professor Drolekson's crystalline structure was vibrating so rapidly it appeared to be buzzing. Administrator Vexler's 8 limbs were gesticulating in what might have been excitement or alarm. As the chamber decompressed and warmed, Ilara rolled down her sleeves, trying to appear casual despite her racing heart. She had done it, not because she was extraordinary among humans, but because what seemed impossible to the galactic community was simply challenging for a human. When she stepped out, the crowd didn't retreat in fear. For the first time since her arrival, they pressed forward, translators buzzing with questions and exclamations. Ilara smiled, careful not to show her teeth. Administrator Vexler's office transformed into an impromptu monitoring station as faculty members crowded around the large display screen. The footage showed Ilara inside the high-pressure chamber, calmly manipulating materials that the station's safety protocols classified as extreme hazards. "She's doing it." Vexler's voice rose higher than his translator could properly modulate, his thin limbs vibrating with agitation. On screen, Ilara handled the catalyzing agent with bare hands, wearing only basic protective gloves rather than the mechanical manipulation arms that most species required. "The human is manipulating the catalyzing agents directly," whispered Assistant Professor Kixie, a blue-tinged being with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. "Our models indicated this would require specialized mechanical interfaces, yet she's using her appendages." Professor Drolekson adjusted the viewing angle. "Look at her skin. No signs of tissue damage despite the pressure and cold. Her species evolved in conditions we consider extreme hazards. Do you realize what this means?" Professor Tlzer's skin had shifted to an excited purple-blue. "The traits we classified as dangerous are precisely what allow for this breakthrough. Her calcium-reinforced skeletal structure withstands the pressure. Her dense musculature provides the fine control. Her thermal regulation system ignores the cold." Administrator Vexler's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Perhaps we have been hasty in our assessment of human integration potential. The calibration system's success changed everything. Overnight, Ilara transformed from biological hazard to biological marvel. The next morning, she received a message from Administrator Vexler requesting her presence at an emergency faculty meeting. When she arrived, the conference room was filled with professors and administrators. For once, they didn't back away when she entered. "Human Chen," began Administrator Vexler. "Yesterday's demonstration has prompted a reassessment of human capabilities and their application within the Academy. We would like to formally request your assistance with several research projects previously considered impractical due to environmental limitations." Ilara blinked in surprise. "I'd be happy to help, Administrator. That's why I came here, to learn and contribute." Over the following weeks, Ilara's schedule filled with research collaborations. She worked with Professor Drolixin on energy systems that required what aliens considered extreme conditions. She assisted Professor Jixna in materials science, testing composites under stresses no other biological entity could apply. In xenobiology, she helped Professor Tulzer understand how humans' hyper-aggressive immune systems might provide insights for treating immunodeficiency disorders in other species. Students began to approach her with questions rather than fear. A small group even requested tutorials on human durability exercises, fascinated by the concept of deliberately stressing muscles to strengthen them, a process most species found counterintuitive or impossible. Not everyone was convinced. Some faculty members and students still maintained their distance, viewing humans as unpredictable and potentially dangerous. But progress was undeniable. 3 months into her first term, disaster struck the Academy. Real disaster, not the social kind Ilara had grown accustomed to. The alert blared through every communication channel. "Emergency protocols activated. Station orbit DDSTABILIs going. G-Drava ATAIL. NL. ANLOBMANALYDTTT." Ilara was in the materials lab when the first shockwave hit. The station shuddered violently. Gravity fluctuated, sending equipment floating momentarily before crashing back down. Around her, students panicked, some flowing into amorphous protective shapes, others extending stabilization limbs, still others entering hibernation states triggered by extreme stress. Her neural interface pinged with an urgent message from Administrator Vexler. "Human Chen to Engineering Bay 4 immediately. Emergency situation." She raced through corridors already filling with emergency atmospheric barriers as the station's systems tried to compensate for structural damage. When she reached Engineering Bay 4, she found chaos. Administrator Vexler, Professor Drolixin, and the station's chief engineer, a gelatinous being named Director Zoom, hovered around a holographic display showing the station's orbit rapidly decaying. "Human Chen." Vexler's translator couldn't hide the stress in his voice. "A previously undetected quantum singularity has formed near the gas giant. Its gravitational effects are pulling us out of stable orbit. We have less than 2 hours before critical structural failure." The station's main propulsion system could compensate, explained Director Zoom, but the power coupling was damaged in the initial shockwave. It must be physically reset and recalibrated. "Why can't the maintenance drones handle it?" Ilara asked. Professor Drolixin's crystalline structure dimmed. "The coupling chamber is flooded with radiation from the singularity. Electronics fail within seconds. And the conditions." "Let me guess," Ilara interrupted. "Crushing pressure, extreme temperatures, toxic atmosphere." "Precisely," said Administrator Vexler. "Conditions that would kill any concordat species instantly." "But not a human," Ilara finished. "Not a Deathworlder." For a moment, she felt a surge of bitter amusement. The very traits that had made her an outcast now made her the station's only hope. "Show me what I need to do," she said. 20 minutes later, Ilara stood at the entrance to the maintenance shaft wearing a modified environmental suit. The regular suits couldn't withstand the conditions inside, so they had reinforced this one with additional shielding. It would offer minimal protection, not enough for a non-human, but hopefully enough to keep her alive. "The coupling system is 200 meters down the shaft," Director Zoom explained. "You'll need to manually reset the quantum field aligners, Then recalibrate the main power coupling. The holographic guide will show each step. I understand, Ilara said, checking her equipment one last time. Human Chen, Ilara. Administrator Vexler's voice had softened. This is far beyond academic demonstration. The risk is significant. Ilara nodded. I know, but if I don't try, we all die anyway. She sealed her helmet and stepped into the airlock. The inner door closed behind her, and the decontamination cycle began. Through the small window, she could see the gathered faculty watching her, no longer with fear, but with hope. The outer door opened, revealing the maintenance shaft, a narrow tunnel bathed in ominous red emergency lighting. Ilara took a deep breath and began her descent. The further she went, the worse conditions became. Gravity increased as she approached the station's core. Temperature climbed as radiation leaked from damaged systems. Her suit's sensors flashed warnings she already felt in her straining muscles and burning lungs. At 150 meters, her helmet display began to glitch, radiation interfering with the electronics. At 175 meters, it failed completely. She would have to rely on memory for the final procedures. At 200 meters, she reached the coupling chamber, a spherical room filled with a maze of conduits and control panels. The main coupling stood in the center, a massive cylinder now dark and misaligned. Ilara worked methodically despite the growing pain as radiation penetrated her suit. Her fingers, protected only by the suit's gloves, manipulated controls designed for mechanical systems. She reset circuit after circuit, realigned quantum field generators, and finally reached for the main coupling control. It refused to turn, seized by the gravitational stress. Removing her glove despite the danger, she gripped the control with her bare hand and pushed with all her human strength. The control turned. The coupling realigned with a thunderous mechanical sound. Power surged through the system, lights flickering back to life. Ilara didn't remember the journey back up the shaft. Later, they told her she had collapsed just outside the airlock, her suit showing radiation levels that should have been instantly fatal. She awoke 3 days later in the medical bay, surrounded by unfamiliar equipment. Professor Tlzer stood nearby, his skin a calm blue. "Welcome back, Human Chen," he said when he noticed her open eyes. "Or perhaps I should say, Hero Chen." "The station?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Safely back in stable orbit. Your actions saved over 3,000 lives." Ilara tried to sit up, but found herself too weak. "The radiation would have killed any of us instantly," Professor Tlzer finished. "For you, it caused significant damage, but your cellular regeneration is remarkable. Another trait we underestimated." He moved closer, no longer maintaining the safety distance. "The faculty has unanimously voted to reclassify humans in our biological database. No longer simply dangerous Deathworlders, but uniquely adapted crisis response specialists." Ilara laughed, then winced at the pain in her chest. "That's quite an upgrade." In the days that followed, as Ilara recovered, a steady stream of faculty and students visited her, bringing gifts, asking questions, or simply sitting nearby in what their species considered companionable silence. On the day she was released from medical care, Administrator Vexler met her at the door. "The Earth Confederation has been informed of your actions," he said. "They are, understandably, quite proud. But more importantly, the Galactic Concordat High Council has taken notice. They have authorized an expanded human admission program for next term." Ilara smiled, this time without hiding her teeth. No one flinched. "It seems your diplomatic mission was a success," Vexler continued. "You have opened doors, as your ambassador hoped." As they walked through the corridors, Ilara noticed something had changed. The warning signs outside her quarters had been removed. The buffer zone around her in public spaces had disappeared. Students nodded in greeting rather than averting their sensory organs. In the nutrition center, a group of students from her stellar engineering class waved her over to their table. As she sat down, one of them, A photosynthetic being named Phla pushed a container toward her. We synthesized this based on Earth nutritional profiles, Phla said, leaves fluttering in what Ilara had learned was excitement. It should be compatible with your digestive system. Ilara opened the container to find something resembling a protein bar. She took a careful bite and smiled. It's good. Thank you. We have been studying human cultural records, said another student, a crystalline being named Tusk. There is a concept we find intriguing: friendship. We would like to attempt this cultural exchange. Ilara looked around the table at the diverse collection of beings, each evolved for entirely different worlds, with different biologies, different perceptions, different ways of thinking. Yet here they were, trying to understand her as she had been trying to understand them. I would like that very much, she said. Later that evening, Ilara stood at the viewport in her quarters, looking out at the gas giant and the stars beyond. Her neural interface pinged with a message from Earth, a congratulatory note from the Confederation ambassador. Your success has changed perceptions throughout the Concordat. The term Deathworlder is being reconsidered in diplomatic channels. Sometimes our greatest weaknesses turn out to be our greatest strengths when viewed from a different perspective. You've taught them that lesson admirably. Ilara smiled. The journey had only just begun. Next term would bring more human students, more challenges, more opportunities to bridge the vast differences between species evolved on worlds as different as could be imagined. But one thing had become clear. In a universe full of fragile beauty, sometimes you needed someone who evolved on a world of danger. Sometimes the monsters weren't monsters at all, just heroes waiting for the right moment to show what they could do. She touched her hand to the transparent barrier, feeling the subtle vibration of the station. Thousands of different beings living and working together despite impossible odds. Somewhere out there were more worlds, more species, more ways of being alive in this vast universe. And humanity, it seemed, had just taken its first real step into that larger community. Not as conquerors, not as frightening Deathworlders, but as something perhaps more valuable. Problem solvers, risk takers, the ones who could venture where others could not. The ones who could turn danger into opportunity. The unlikely heroes from a deadly world.